I was able to stop smoking with the aid of brain spotting, and I'm going to explain a little bit about how that was possible. So a lot of the times we work on the reason why we smoke or we drink or we do something else. In terms of an addiction, we work on the trigger and the behavioral response. And then we try and mitigate that. We try and put things in place. We try and bring self-awareness to that. And maybe we try and structure our time to avoid certain situations, or we just try and ascertain how that plays out, and then we try and intervene when we can. What I found incredibly effective was my brain spotting in terms of when I was looking at my smoking. I did a brain spotting session around why does a part of me, because it's always a part, it's not the whole person, it's always a part. Why does a part of me want to smoke? And when I was able to get in touch with that part came forth, and what it was really about was that part had a damaged sense of self-worth, and it was trying to supplement a feeling of fullness and connection with nicotine. And so by working on that base level of self-worth, it then translated to just an absence of this kind of urge to smoke. Even more so, I discovered that being around the smoke of others wasn't triggering. Before that, I'd always had this kind of, oh, that'd be really nice, I'd really like a cigarette. But after doing the brain spotting, that actually went. Usually I'd be sitting there and I'd be twiddling my fingers and I'd be really having to work harder, going, you know what, you're going to get through this, you're going to pass this, you're going to pass this. And I've done a lot of work on addiction. I've done a lot of work with people with addiction, but I've also done a lot of personal work with addiction. One of my biggest teachings about addiction was actually going through an incredibly long and protracted withdrawal process from benzodiazepines, which took 2 years and then a further 2 years to recover from. So, and that was all done a lot of the time with grit and perseverance. And it was a totally hellish experience, and one that took us such a long time to recover from. The thing with addictions are that they really mess with our gut, and our gut is so involved in the production of certain chemicals which regulate our mood. So when you go through a process of withdrawal, or you go through a process of kind of cutting something out of your life, especially in terms of like a substance, then there's this readjustment period after that, which can be really, really tricky to handle. It pushes you into really vulnerable spaces, and it can actually land you in a space of depression or anxiety for months and months and months afterwards. This was something I wasn't aware of at the time. It's something I discovered later. But it all made sense, and particularly with certain medications. So if you are going through a process of withdrawal from certain medications, there is then a next stage that needs to be addressed, which is how you're going to balance and repopulate some of your microbiome. And it's great now that there's a lot of information coming through around how to do that. But it's such a big part of the puzzle. It's a big piece of the puzzle that a lot of people miss when they're working on addiction. Is trying to address some of the biological changes that take place in the process of withdrawal and then afterwards. So brain spotting can be a really, really great way to support that, and a really, really great adjunct approach that can then provide you with a lot of resources around staying clean, staying sober, and really staying on track, and not always having to fight that urge. I think that's a really interesting part of this whole living in sobriety. Is a lot of people say, you know, it's a daily effort. It has to be fought with. And sure, there's a transitional stage that you have to go through where the pull back into that is going to be really strong, and then something will happen in life, and maybe you'll get pulled back into it again. But I think if you're able to address some of the core issues around why that's taking place in the first place, then that can really help mitigate that pull back in. Because once the issue, especially around self-worth, is addressed, then there's a realization that takes place in the body, and it's on such a deep level, it's not a cognitive thing. The body doesn't want to harm itself anymore, because essentially that's what it's doing, it's harming. It is soothing, but there is a It's soothing with a poison. So it's this, if it had an adequate sense of self-worth, then it wouldn't be soothing with that. It would then move towards soothing with something more productive, more maybe connection-based or healthier. And so it's really, it's not about replacing one for the other. It's really about going in and saying, well, what is the purpose of that? Why is that the case? We work with what is, not what's preferable, or not what we think is. We work with just what is. And that's the surefire way to create a really, really sustainable and meaningful recovery process.